Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gen Talks, a podcast where we talk about mindset, listening to our intuition, trusting our gut, channeling our inner voice, our self awareness, love, relationships, emotions. We all have them, but we don't want to talk about them. How to cope with the loss of a loved one and what those healthy coping mechanisms look like, the rules of fitness, and so much more. If you are new here, my name is Jennifer, spelled with two N's, but I'm a Jen that's spelled with one N. I know it's a little complicated, but I like to keep it simple. And that's why it's, Jen with one M. If you're coming back because either you or someone you know has lost someone and are unsure on how to cope, then I'm sorry for your loss and thank you for being here. As I know losing someone is something mentally and emotionally challenging to not only walk through, but to cope with. Before we get started, if you feel that this topic is too difficult for you to listen to, then I understand. If you want to press pause, then do what feels right for you. Maybe during this moment, you need to sit in silence, and that's okay. Respect where you are in your healing journey and know that this feeling is not permanent and this too shall pass. Maybe you need to take a walk, get fresh air, listen to music, jump around, go for a drive while listening to music or with the windows down, or just be in silence. Maybe you need to cook something, bake, or talk to a friend. If that's what you need, then do it. But know that this episode will be here when you decide it's the right time for you to press play. But one thing I ask of you before you go, okay, is promise me. And you have to pinky promise, okay? You need to kiss your hand too, because it means you can't break this promise. All right? All right. I want you to promise me that you won't avoid or run from your emotions, because once you do, you will go numb. And when that happens, it's hard to wake up. Trust me, I've been there and don't want you to walk down the same road I did. Okay? Okay, you promised. And if you break it, I'm going to know. All right? And more of that jersey is going to come out and it's not going to be cute. Okay? Okay. But on that note, let's begin. During the beginning of the first episode, where I talk about how fear and perfection go hand in hand, I briefly mentioned that before I started my senior year of college at Suffolk University in Boston, my charming mother, Gloria, passed away at a young age of 61 from a very rare form of cancer that only 1 out of 100 women get. Unfortunately, my mom was the 1%. Before she was diagnosed with cancer, I operated under the not in my backyard mentality and felt carefree, debonair, and that everything in life was great. My family and I were healthy. I was going to school in city I love, had my friends, felt calm, and that everything was going to be okay. But little did I know that on July 2nd, 2010, the apple cart of my life was going to shatter. It felt like I was just walking along without a worry, pushing this apple cart right in front of me, and all of a sudden, kaboom, the apple pieces of the apple cart and the apples go flying, and I'm stuck without figuring out how to put these pieces back together and how to make sense of it all. I didn't realize at 20 years old their time where as a woman I needed my mother the most. That I'd be left figuring out how to pick up the pieces and how to put them back together again. But I'll talk about that later on how I not only rebuilt the apple cart, but made it stronger. During my mother's wake on July 5th, 2010, family and friends were entering the funeral parlor and standing in line waiting to give their condolences. I felt lightheaded, and as someone quickly put an imaginary veil over my eyes where I was unable to see clearly, and everything felt hazy. I thought that my mom was taking a vacation in Salt Lake City, which is one of her favorite places, and she'd be back soon. Yeah, mom, I'm talking about you. I got company here, okay? I'll get to you later. Oi. Anyway, as I was saying, my mother's passing didn't feel real. Before heading back to Boston to finish my senior year of college, I had a place of not wanting to go back and face the music. I told my dad that I didn't want to go back to school and wanted to take some time off. I remember him telling me, if you don't go back, you will never finish. And he was right. In that moment, I knew I had no choice but to go back to school and face the world without my mom. Little did I know that her passing away was going to be my renewal and that I was about to embark on something that no skilled sailor could ever imagine. When I got back to Boston, if you haven't been to Boston, I got to paint the scene here, okay? I lived in Beacon Hill, which is a very cute and quaint area in Boston that has steep hills, kid, where sidewalks on both sides of the street are composed of brick. It's very, very cute, actually. And they have the occasional charming cobblestone pathways scattered throughout the whole area. Normally, on my way to school, I walked up Anderson Street. So that's where I lived, and I passed Phillips Street, which runs perpendicularly, and walked up Anderson past Phillips until I got to Myrtle Street, where I turned left and walked to school, which is about a 5-minute walk, here and there. On my way to school, I always made sure to put my headphones on and listen to music, which is one of my favorite coping mechanisms. But on this day, instead of listening to music as I normally do, all I could hear was a broken record going off in my mind, repeating the same lyrics. I lost my mom. I lost my mom. I lost my mom. Over and over and over again, as if it were permanently stuck in a loop. Throughout the beginning of my senior year, I was lost and had no interest in spending time with friends and looked at the world differently. Since my mom passed away, there was a battle going on between my head and my heart, and I didn't even know what the fight was about, nor did I sign up for it. I knew I needed something to do to help me cope and that I needed to keep my mother's spirit alive. During the first semester, I signed up to do another radio show in honor of my mom and called it the Gloria Jean Music Hour. Throughout the show, I played songs my mom and I both liked and talked about them. Even though this was a creative outlet because I was able to share songs with others, I still felt empty, and the inner spark or passion to pursue a career in the music industry was gone. I signed up for therapy to talk through how I was feeling because I felt alone in all of this and didn't even know how I was feeling. I knew there was a swirling storm inside and that I needed to healthily release my emotions, whether it be through crying, talking about my mom, and just grieve. I needed to be in a space where I could just sit, be in my thoughts, take the weight of my mother's passing off of my shoulders, and just breathe. During therapy, my therapist mentioned the concept of radical acceptance, which is when you accept something that you can't change, even though you know it's there. I understood the concept, but was unsure on how to apply that to my healing journey until later on in life, which I'll talk about later on. Even though I was in therapy, I felt stressed and overwhelmed with school, and I felt like everything in my life was out of control. I was strong, but even the strong ones need a break too sometimes. And I didn't realize that when I was going through all of this. As I was crying, I called my dad and sister and mentioned that I wanted to come home for a little bit to take some time off and remember them telling me, finish for mom. As soon as I heard those words, a switch went off in the right corner of my mind, and I started focusing more and more on school, but at a cost. I stopped eating. I didn't know I was harming myself and didn't realize that this mindset was causing my body to slowly start shutting down. I knew I had to turn this ship around and sail it towards the light, and that the only way out was through. To focus on my mental health and well being, I went part time at school, took 2 classes during the spring semester, and 2 summer classes to graduate and finish school towards the end of July 2011. During the first week of August, I moved back home to New Jersey and knew that I had to stay positive. I thought that by me having a positive attitude for my family, then everything would be okay. But at that time, I didn't realize that I wasn't mentally strong enough to handle the aftermath of my mother's death. I was 21 years old, trying to figure out my next steps in life, a career path to embark on, while also figuring out how to put the pieces of the apple cart back together. I was trying to be the light, but each passing day, the light inside of me slowly started fading until the light went completely out. and I went numb. Keep in mind, numb is a feeling and it's an emotion. Looking back, I turned to this emotion as a form of self protection because I didn't want to be consumed by negativity. I didn't want to live in a world composed of bitterness, toxicity, and sadness, and didn't want to surround myself in that energy. I didn't want to adapt. I didn't want to adapt to my environment. And during that moment, I felt like I was living in this storm of negativity, and everything shifted and changed after my mom died. The light was gone. And I remember someone telling me that I needed to adapt to my environment. Even though I was tired, drained, and depressed, my inner voice came in and said no. And I remember thinking, who are you to tell me to adapt to my environment? You don't even know what I'm going through. So time out here because I got something to say. I'm getting a little heated, okay? If there's one thing that you take away from this episode, it's this. Never, and I repeat, never let anyone ever tell you how to feel because how you feel is valid. And if someone tells you otherwise, you bring them to me, okay? To Jersey Jen with one N. All right? Okay. Thank you. I'm only saying this to you because I care about you way too much. And I don't want you to ever feel like you have to stay stuck in something that is not meant for you. When someone tells you that you have to adapt to your environment, you don't. They're only telling you that because they adapted and gave in. But you don't have to do that. I'm not telling you this out of pity. I don't want that. I'm telling you this because when I shut down on the inside, I turned into a ghost. But here is a warning, and I said this before and I will say it again. Once you go numb, it is hard to wake up. And when you do, anger takes over, which can either be used to propel you forward or spiral downwards. Since I went numb, I felt completely disconnected mentally, physically, and emotionally, and turned into a hollow shell. After a while, I started to feel angry that I was in this situation, angry that I didn't have a purpose in my life, angry that I felt my life was held back because my mom passed away, angry that my mom died because the person I needed the most was gone, angry that I felt like I didn't have anyone to turn to. Because of that, I swept all of my emotions under the rug and tried to fill every little crevice and ignored them until one day they couldn't be ignored any longer, and everything started pouring out. By me pushing my emotions away and pretending like they didn't exist, the anger and resentment swooped in, and I felt the anger rise. And it was only a matter of time before I couldn't hold back anymore. I was angry because my mom was gone, felt like no one understood, and felt stuck in my life because of it. I was lost, and every day felt like Groundhog Day, where I was reliving the same day over and over and over again, and just wanted out of this nightmare. I felt this bout of electricity rushing through my veins and knew I had to use this anger to push myself forward and bring freedom into my life because I didn't want to stay stuck in this loop. I knew I had a choice that I could either continue to live in bitterness, which would only rot my soul, or use this anger to break free and live in the light. Which leads me to a very special quote from a personal favorite character of mine named Sirius Black from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, written by J.K. Rowling. During the fifth book, as a teenager, Harry starts to feel streaks of anger and is unsure on how to channel this emotion, since he feels like a bad person for even having these feelings. In this scene, he confides in his godfather, Sirius Black, and says that he feels angry all the time and wonders if that makes him a bad person. With care and concern, Sirius says, I want you to listen to me very carefully, Harry. You are not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to. Besides, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are. Just how Harry Potter had a choice on how to channel his anger, I had a choice too, and knew that I had to use it for the better to push me forward in my life and not use it for self destruction. Really, Jen? Isn't Harry Potter for kids? Don't talk to me like that, okay? Okay? Because the same concept here applies to you too, all right? When something bad happens to you, and it doesn't have to be related to losing someone, don't you feel angry? Don't you feel bitter? Don't you feel like a victim or maybe abandoned or lost? The point is that bad things happen to all of us, but it doesn't define who we are. Instead, when something difficult happens, it is up to us to decide if we want to channel the light within us or reside in the dark. And before we continue, I have a little confession here, okay? I only read the first book of Harry Potter. Don't judge me. Please don't. Because if Judge Jen is not in session, then neither are you, okay? Whew, I feel better. I feel lighter. I get off my chest. We're good. All right. Thank you. Thank you for not judging. Okay. Back to the podcast. Even though I was angry, I felt sorrow, sadness, and found it very hard to hold back my tears. All these emotions were consuming me, and I didn't know what to expect or which one was going to show up next. During this time of my healing journey, I started baking more and more since it is something I love to do on my own and always loved it since I was a kid. To me, baking is creative, and I am producing something that is bigger than me. Also, me being a very hands on person, the way for me to connect with something is by touching it. And when I run my fingers through the flour, cut the butter, make cookie dough, build a cake, or am a part of anything with baking, I feel connected and alive, as if what I'm creating is a part of me. The spark that I thought went out during my senior year of college came back. But instead of a spark, it was a flame. And that's how I knew it was time to embark on the path of baking and pastry. In 2014, I went to the International Culinary Center in New York City for both baking and pastry and bread baking. In January 2015, I started working at a French restaurant called Lafayette in New York City. And even though it was over 4 years since my mom passed away, I was still struggling on the inside and still felt defined by my mother's death. One evening, I sat on my bed thinking about my mom and how lost I felt without her. I knew my life was turned upside down, but I didn't know what to do. In that moment, I needed a glimmer of hope, a sign that everything was going to be okay and that I would get out of this hole that I subconsciously put myself in. As I was crying for my mom, one of my dear friends, Billy, who I've known since undergrad, messaged me on Facebook. At that moment, I was down and I was definitely not in the mood and remember thinking to myself, not now, Billy, this is not the time. But I decided to open the message and noticed that he sent me a music video to the song called Gloria by The Midnight. Little did I know that not only this song was going to change my life, but that The Midnight was going to give me hope. Hope that everything will be okay. Hope that I will get through this and will live in the light. After I heard this song, I immediately asked Billy which other songs he recommended, and I started listening to their EP called Days of Thunder from the beginning and knew their music was the answer. As I walked around my neighborhood, listening to the Midnight on repeat, and I remember this very, very well, I felt their music course through my veins and felt like life and hope were pumped back inside of me again. Because of them, I was able to slowly put back together the pieces of the apple cart, but this time it would be painted with something that would breathe new life into it, something unique and with meaning. Little did I know, this would be my renewal. There's an ancient Japanese art technique called kintsugi, and that is spelled, get your pen and paper out, okay? K, I, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, S as in Sam, U, G, I, which translates to golden joinery, and this technique is used when something breaks and needs to be restored. For example, let's say you have a broken vase that needs to be repaired. To bring this vase back to life, you would mend the broken pieces together with a certain sap lacquer, which can be mixed with powdered gold, silver, and or platinum. Okay, Jen, I didn't sign up for an art class. Don't get me started, all right? I ain't got time for you. Anywho's, what I'm trying to say is that this technique can be used as a form of restoration to not only put this piece back together, but to bring a second life, a beautiful renewal, restoration, and a unique strength. So, Billy, if you are listening, I want to thank you because you saved me. Because of these small series of events, I'm able to share my story and say that it does get better. Even to this day, I find myself listening to Gloria on full blast while dancing and singing along as if I was actually listening to it for the very first time. The same way that the midnight was a glimmer of hope for me, I hope this message is a glimmer of hope for whoever's listening. As I enter the restoration period at the age of 26, I found myself unpacking all of my emotions with the tears of grief flowing. I remember one day as I was sitting on the steps in the kitchen, out of a place of concern, my dad asked me why I was crying and for me to please not cry. While sobbing, I firmly said, "Dad, you have to let me cry and please don't tell me not to cry." As he sat back in his chair and folded his hands, he peacefully said, "Okay." Since he knew whatever was happening needed to be released, and even though he was sad for me, he had to let me be. I felt a surge of strength coming through me because I knew that crying was not a weakness, but instead a sign of strength and a healthy way to release. And I hope you know that crying is okay too. There is a notion that if you cry, you are weak. And if you're happy all the time, you're strong. What if I were to tell you that is not true? That crying is healthy and it means something needs to be released. Crying is a sign that you are coping, that you can be both sad and strong at the same time, and is necessary for healing. I never said healing would be easy, but crying makes you feel lighter, and if that's what you need, cry. If there's something else I want you to take away from today, is never let anyone ever tell you how to feel because how you feel is valid, and crying makes you vulnerable, which is a strength because it shows that you're not afraid to express how you truly feel. I care about you way too much for you to continue living your life operating under the rule that crying is weakness. When someone says that to you, it may have two different meanings. The first means that this person doesn't want you to go through the pain and only says it out of a place of concern. Or they don't know how to deal with their emotions and it makes them feel better if you don't either. Just a thought. Even though my mom passed away 13 years ago, not up until 2022 did I really start radically accepting my mother's death. During therapy in college, my therapist mentioned the concept called radical acceptance, where you accept something you can't change and are at peace with it. For example, let's say you buy a yellow house and you hate the color yellow and decide to paint it blue. Even though you painted the house a different color, underneath that new coat of blue paint, the house is yellow and hasn't truly changed, which means you have to accept something that you can't change. I understood this concept, but didn't apply it to my mother's passing until very recently, where I stopped asking the man upstairs, and no, not my upstairs neighbor who stomps all the time. Yeah, I'm talking about you. All right, can you cool it, please? Thank you. Anyway, but I stopped asking the other man upstairs, why did you take her away from me? Why did you leave me alone when I needed you the most? And I accepted the fact that this can't be changed, and even though she's not physically here, she's always by my side and lives within me. Hi mom, how you doing? I started talking to my mom, which is what I do every day, and I thought about the fact that I was grateful to have her as my mom. Even though she passed away when I was 20, I was and am still grateful that she was physically a part of my life for that period of time and is still with me to this day. But it took me a long time to accept the fact that she was gone. And what helped me through this was practicing gratitude and also reflecting on the traits my mom carried and talking to her. With reflection, I mentally thought about the traits that she had that I can actually apply to my life and the ones I left behind because even the traits you leave behind show you how not to be. Nobody is perfect, and I know my mom isn't. I thought she was going to yell at me. Okay, we're okay. Phew, all right. But my mother was and is kind, genuine, independent, fearless, enterprising, sharp, dynamic, full of love and adventure. And she let me be me, which is a blessing within itself. The takeaway is try to think about the positive characteristics and apply them to your life and learn from the traits that you want to leave behind. Another important part of coping is remembering that it's okay to live your life. It's okay to smile, to laugh, love, go on an adventure, and just live. Because if you don't, You are doing yourself a disservice, and life is meant to be lived. For 11 years, I told myself, I'm going to celebrate my mom's life, but never did. I would say, on Mother's Day, I'm going to buy her flowers and take her out to dinner, and I would buy the flowers, but didn't go out to dinner. I would consistently say, I'll do it next year, until very recently when I decided that I needed to keep my mother's spirit alive and celebrate her life. I needed to talk about her and share stories since that helps me cope, and talking about the person, although it may be challenging emotionally, is also another healthy coping skill, which can't be rushed and is something you have to do in your own time. But now, on her birthday, Mother's Day, her wedding anniversary, which is coming up very soon, so let me know where you want to go, Mom, okay? Okay. And also on the day she passed away, I celebrate my mom's life and take her anywhere she wants to go. I find myself asking my mom, all right, Mom, where do you want to go for Mother's Day? Which flowers do you want? Do you want one bouquet or two? For example, for this past Mother's Day, I bought Gloria pink roses and asked my mom if she wanted to go to a restaurant called Houston's. I could tell she didn't because it felt forced and it didn't feel right. I then asked her if she wanted to go to a Disney restaurant called the Flying Fish, which is a family favorite restaurant, and saw they had one time slot open. And that restaurant is very tough to get into, okay? I've tried too many times. Too tough. But anywho's, that was my mom telling me she wanted to celebrate Mother's Day, and we made it happen. Anyway, I found this to be a healthy coping skill because even though she is not physically here, I know she's with me every step of the way, and that her spirit lives within me, and she wants me to continue to live my life and not stay stuck in the loss. Although I was close with my mom, maybe either you or someone you know lost someone where the dynamic was difficult and there wasn't a close relationship, and that's okay. It's important that this is addressed, but before I do, I have to say that I'm sorry for your loss. And I want you to know that it's okay if you didn't have a close relationship, since there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that maybe this person loved you the only way they know how because that's how they were loved. As one of my dear friends, Rachel, said, when we love, we teach others how to love us, which is true. If how this person loved you did not align with your needs, then there is tension because you didn't get the love that you needed. And if that's the case, I am truly sorry. Sometimes maybe our other relatives or friends become our family, and that's okay too. The last thing I want you to think or feel is that there's something wrong with you because you and your loved one were not close and didn't have a relationship. Remember, no one's family is perfect, and the takeaway is to not let this define you and to know that you deserve to be loved. And I know it can be challenging to find a coping mechanism that works for you. Sometimes we all get in our own heads, right? Where it feels impossible to get out and we are trapped in our thoughts. When that happens, I want you to move. And when I say move, I mean walk, go for a jog, run, work out. I love working out, it helps me. Dance, I love dancing. Ever since I was a kid, I get to release my emotions. It's very therapeutic. I love it. You can kickbox. Maybe you want to use your hands, right? You can draw, sketch, write, paint. Painting is one. You can knit, garden, cook, bake, create, or just build something. You can go for a drive with or without music on. Or if you need to talk, call someone that you trust and can lean on. Do something that works for you and helps you cope in a healthy way. Remember, if you find yourself in tears while coping, well, then that is beautiful because you are releasing something that needs to go and something that you are not meant to hold on to, and never let anyone ever tell you otherwise. The healing journey is messy with mixed emotions, but that's okay. And this doesn't have to pertain to someone passing away. But maybe you're grieving the end of a relationship or a friendship. Keep in mind, there's no set deadline to when you're fully healed, and honestly, time is a healer of all things. My dear friend Rachel also said, you have to feel it to heal it. And I hold those words near and dear to my heart. In the beginning, I talked about anger and how there are two ways to channel it. It's important to not fear the range of emotions that are coming and know they are signaling something. For example, when I feel down, and I do this quite a bit, I feel down or feel anxious, I literally say out loud to myself, I sit down, I say out loud, okay, Jen, what's going on, sweetie pop? What's happening here? Why are you anxious? Why are you sad? Why do you feel this way? And for this, it's important to be your own best friend, but to also understand your emotions since they are telling you something. As I mentioned during the beginning stages of mourning my mom, I was swimming in numbness, anger, and sadness and didn't know how to swim to shore. But now I do. The key is to not judge yourself for how you feel and to not push your emotions away or be afraid to understand them because they're talking to you for a reason. Keep in mind, as you're heading to shore, a wave might storm in and hold you back, but that's okay. It will pass. It's part of the healing journey. The important piece is to understand why that wave came in and then sail past it. And no, we are all human. We all have a sea of emotions living inside of us, and we are all in this together. Which leads us to our nota bene, which means in Italian, you already know, you guessed it. I have great listeners here. I love it. The note well section or the reflection segment of our topic today. I know that this was an emotional and maybe difficult topic, but I'm grateful that I get to share this story and hopefully help you think about how to apply healthy coping mechanisms to your life and what they are. Remember, try and list down the positive traits that this person who is no longer physically here embodied and see how you can adopt them for yourselves. But keep in mind the traits that you would leave behind, since those also teach you how not to be. Find and use healthy coping mechanisms that work for you. For example, I like to share stories about my mom, talk to her every day, go on adventures, dance, work out to hone in on my mental, physical, and emotional strength, bake, cry if I need to release something. And I was actually crying, okay, about this episode beforehand. I'm not gonna lie. Right? I had Gloria on in the background and I was singing along, singing that and my lungs were about to fall out. But I was blasting it to help me through this. I also listen to music that she enjoyed, talk it out, take her to her favorite places if I can, and celebrate life. You're probably thinking, well, that's quite the list. I know it is. But remember, it took time for me to figure out what works for me, and the same will happen for you. Remember, keep moving forward, practice healthy coping mechanisms that work for you. Give yourself time, patience, and grace. Lean on the ones that are there for you, and know that you are never truly alone. Something else to keep in mind is that healing is a process and a journey, and there's no set deadline, and it all comes with time. Please don't rush the process and know that each storm doesn't last forever. Anger does not make you a bad person. Crying is a strength and it's a sign of release, and never let anyone ever tell you otherwise. Another takeaway is don't be afraid of your emotions because they are signaling something to you, and use those healthy coping skills to help you during your journey. Remember, you are not a product of your environment and you can change the course. So hold on to your captain's wheel and always sail towards the light. All right? Once you make it to shore, you will feel a little more grounded and emotionally stable. You just have to keep going, and I promise you will get there. To wrap up, I want to end this episode with another infamous Harry Potter quote where Albus Dumbledore states in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban that happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. Until next time on Gen Talks, where we talk about the foundation of relationships and what that really means. If you find this episode helpful, please feel free to like, comment, share, and or subscribe on YouTube, and to like and follow on Spotify. Or if you want to follow me along on Instagram, you can find me at Jen. You already know, but I'll say it again, Jen with one N, Talks, TALKS, podcast. Or if you don't feel comfortable reaching out on social media, posting a comment, then please feel free to email me at gentalkspodcast@gmail.com. Also, I want to say this before we end things. If either you or someone you know is experiencing a loss of any kind, please feel free to pass this episode along, as maybe these words are what they need to hear. On that note, I want to thank you for tuning in, but more importantly, thank you for being you. Sending you all peace, light, and love. Take care as always. Until next time. Bye.